Somebody once asked me, has anyone really been far even as decided to use even go want to do look more like? How the hell should I know?
They just don't make games like they used to. Truth is, I'm in my late 20s. Back when I was growing up, we didn't have HD graphics, online play, motion controls, or any of that shit. Games were simpler back then, and arcades were actually fun instead of a repository for so-called skill games that dispense out tickets that get traded for cheap knickknacks. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, when arcade games had that special something that kept players pumping their quarters into the machine. So today, I'm going to count down my favorite arcade games. But since there are so many, I'm going to limit this to the 1980s, which is often called the golden age of the arcades. Keep in mind, I'm judging their gameplay, lasting value, and how well they hold up today. Not to mention, since the games for the most part are very simple, there won't be too much to explain. And due to the sheer number of games in existence, this list will be different from yours. So, without further ado, here's my list of the top 15 arcade games of the 1980s. Hey Dio, is that new transition ready? Alright, it's game time! During the arcade boom, one of the companies leading the charge was Namco. They made so many arcade games, it's not even funny. Hell, I could make an entire list just from their games, but I won't. Instead, to start off this list, here's one of Namco's lesser-known games, The Tower of Druaga. Released in 1984, this game was essentially a dungeon crawler in an arcade game, and it actually worked rather well. It was basically Zelda before Zelda was Zelda. You play as Gilgamesh, who is seeking to save his beloved Kai from the demon Druaga. The object on each floor is to grab a key, find a treasure, and get to the exit, slaying enemies along the way. The execution is pretty solid, and the music sounds heroic for an early arcade game. But one complaint I have is that there's a time limit, and the location of the key is random. Not exactly the best combination. Also, finding the items is dependent on secrets, which can be a problem. Still, this game is actually pretty good, and if you can find it on a Namco compilation disc, I recommend giving it a shot. One question though, how did this inspire an anime? Here's a question for you. Why did the frog cross the road? Well, in Frogger, it's to help you rack up the points. First released by Konami in 1981, the idea of the game is to get your frog first across a road besieged by traffic, then across the river by means of a series of logs, turtles, and the occasional alligator, and safely into one of 5 hollows at the other side. You can earn bonus points by escorting lady frogs across the river, as well as jumping into the hollow that happens to have a fly in it. However, sometimes one of the hollows will have an alligator in it, so you'll want to avoid that one. Timing is essential if you want to reach that high score, especially in later levels, but that's what makes it fun in my opinion. After all, its proven staying power has led to several sequels and remakes over the years. Frogger. Roadkill never looked so good. Ah yes, the twin-stick shooter. Games like Smash TV, Geometry Wars, I Made a Game with Zombies in it, they're full of action and fun. Among the first of this type of game was Williams' Robotron 2084. In this game, you face a horde of super advanced robots who have declared war on humanity.
Gee, an action game where you take on an army of robots bent on destroying mankind. Never heard that one before.
But to its credit, Robotron did it first, and did it well. You control your character with the left stick, and fire in any of 8 directions using the right stick. To clear each level, you have to destroy every robot that can be destroyed, while rescuing humans to earn bonus points. There are several types of robots as well, including invincible robots, devices that spawn robots, and robots that brainwash any human who makes contact with one. Seriously, this game can get pretty intense, and the twin-stick mechanic works very well. Overall, this game is a very enjoyable experience. Unlike the follow-up on N64. Okay, who here thought Wreck-It Ralph was a good movie? Yeah, so did I, and oh my god, I could just cry right about now. Qbert is one of the first games I can ever remember playing. Granted, it was on the Atari, but still, this game holds a lot of nostalgic value. You play as the orange spherical alien on an isometric pyramid. The object of each level is to change the surface of every cube to a given target color, all while outmaneuvering enemies like red balls, gremlins, and snakes. In later levels, the cubes may require more than one bounce, and eventually they start to cycle. Of course, if you get hit... Qbert? What's your language? I mean, seriously, this must have been the first instance of swearing in a video game. Well, not really, but you get the idea. I can remember all the time my family and I used to spend playing this game when I was little, and of course I kicked butt every time.
What?
You really shouldn't be exaggerating about stuff like that.
Aw, come on! This is meant to be a comedy. It's not supposed to be taken seriously.
Adam.
Fine.
Who is that?
That would be my mother!
Remember when Capcom used to not suck? Yeah, it seems like a far-off time, but Capcom used to be completely awesome. And one genre in which they truly excelled was the 2D shooter. Arguably the best of their work in the genre came from 1943. This was a vertical scrolling shooter set during World War II where you piloted a single aircraft against hordes of enemy planes and battleships. It had everything people have come to expect from a 2D shooter and then some. Tons of cannon fodder enemies, awesome power-ups, and some cool music to boot. This was also one of those rare scrolling shooters where you didn't go down in one hit. Instead, you had a life bar that slowly decreased as you took damage and used special attacks. So you had to manage your resources lest you hear that nerve-wracking noise. Oh my god, turn it down, I'm not gonna make it! Yeah! Let's be honest, Asteroids would probably be on here if I was counting the 70s as well. But this next entry plays like Asteroids on steroids. It starts with your ship, a bunch of asteroids, and a swarm of enemy ships. The idea is to gather crystals from asteroids by shooting them. These crystals become bombs, which become essential to completing a level. Meanwhile, your enemies are trying to gather those same crystals and try to destroy you. And when the enemy gets enough, he's coming for you.
I am Sinistar. Beware, I live.
I mean, holy shit. The side of that thing was definitely your cue to run, especially if you didn't have enough bombs to take that thing down. This was one challenging game, and it wasn't afraid to let you know it with its digitized speech. I mean, it's not much nowadays, but back then, this thing could really freak you out. Damn, Williams, you scary! Warning. The following contains footage of one of the most gruesome games ever to not draw any blood. That's right, it's Dig Dug. A seemingly innocent game that, when you think about it, is downright sick. You play as Taizo Hori, an exterminator that wields what can only be described as a bicycle pump, which is utilized to inflate pukas and frigars until they explode. I mean, the pressure exerted by that pump makes for one of the most disgusting ways to die in video game history, and you don't even see the gore. And when that fails, he can just have rocks drop on their poor sorry heads. Just how sick is this guy anyway? I mean, yeah, the frigars can breathe fire, so they're threatening, but what about the pukas? Those poor little things never threatened anyone, but does he care? No, he just goes about his business of death and destruction, and I feel terrible for enjoying this game. I mean, how the hell did this get rated E for everyone? Remember that Top 10 Co-op Games countdown that Josh Scorcher organized? You know, the one that set off a frenzy of audition-based countdowns? Yeah, I didn't audition for that, for reasons I explained in my first episode of My 25 Cents Worth. But if I had auditioned, it probably would have been with Bobble. This was a true part of Taito's legacy. You know, before Square Enix bought them out. Bobble was a game in which you played as one of two cute little dragons whose main attack was, well, blowing bubbles, trapping enemies in said bubbles, and popping said bubbles, leaving the enemies to die and leave behind fruit. With 100 levels to play through, there's a wide variety of enemies and items to really rack up the score. The co-op really works well in this game because there's no value in screwing over your partner, and while there's only one song that plays for most of the game, it's a very charming tune. Bottom line, this is a fun romp that any pair of gamers should have the chance to play together. Yeah, this is what old school co-op should be, Battletoads! Strider effin' Hideo. Oh yeah, this game was definitely a high point for Capcom. Strider was a sci-fi ninja platforming cult classic gem released at the tail end of the decade. You play as Hideo, the ultimate ninja of the future, who wields an awesome light sword, by the way, as he journeys through the Soviet Union, the Siberian tundra, a battleship, the Amazon, and the far reaches of space to throw down with the tyrannical Grandmaster. Along the way, you fight soldiers, robots, and crazy bosses like a Mechanica gorilla, kung fu chicks, and a robotic serpent composed of the entire Soviet parliament. I can't even think of a good joke for this. Hideo controls very smoothly, even being able to climb walls, and is even able to summon robot tigers to aid him in battle. The platforming is challenging but fair, and cutting up enemies is just fun. I guess this is why he's such a fan favorite in the Versus series. And did I mention this was based on a manga? Now, what was that about license-based games sucking? Well, I guess arcades showed us a thing or two. At number 6 on this list is the game that taught us all how to shoot the core, Gradius. While most people remember the NES version, it actually began as an arcade game in 1985. In the game, you pilot the spacecraft known as the Vic Viper through space and across various alien planets. This was a challenging game with lots of obstacles and enemies to face, and many environments to traverse. What really makes this game stand out, however, is the power-up system. By collecting these orange power-ups, you move an indicator on the bar below. You can obtain the highlighted power-up at any time, whether it's a speed boost, a missile, a laser, a shield, a double shot, or the most useful of all, the options, which function like additional ships. This game has built a lasting legacy, with sequels and spin-offs that even have sequels of their own. Konami really did right with this. But it's not their best game of the decade. So what is? Well, it's next on the list, so let's get to it. Leonardo, Donatello, Raphael, Michelangelo. The reptilian renegades that we call the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles really tore up the arcades in the late 80s. We all know about the NES game, and that game was questionable, to put it mildly. On the other hand, the arcade game was a good old side-scrolling beat-em-up which pit the Turtles against legions of foot soldiers, robots, and Mousers, en route to a final showdown with the Shredder. Along the way, players were treated to crisp visuals, catchy music, challenging bosses, and enough pizza to get classic Dante's attention. One thing that made this game especially noticeable was the fact that most cabinets allowed for 4 players to get in on the action at once. However, this could actually work against the group if even one of the players was lacking in skill. This was because the more players were on the screen, the more enemies would show up, leaving more workload for the other players if one of them wasn't up to snuff. Even still, this was a fun and enjoyable romp that still holds up to this day, even with how many looks the Turtles have gotten over the years. Now, you all know about Pong, right? One of the first commercially successful video games ever? Well, it wasn't much fun on your own. And while Breakout kind of alleviated that, the game that truly busted the whole thing wide open was Arkanoid. Just as you'd expect, you play the game by piloting your paddle, the Vouse, and hitting the ball at the array of bricks with the intent of destroying them. What separates this from Breakout is something simple but vital to the genre. Power-ups. You could expand the size of the mouse, make it sticky, give it power to shoot lasers, split the ball into multiple copies, the list goes on! Another thing that became a staple of the Brick Breaker game thanks to Arkanoid is the variations on level design. With Breakout, it was just the same old boring layout, but in Arkanoid you had varying layouts, unbreakable bricks, and bricks that took multiple shots to destroy, and even a boss if you can believe that. This game was so popular that the sequel to Bobble had an entire level dedicated to it. To put it simply, Arkanoid is more than just a Breakout clone. It was an evolution. An evolution that spawned so many clones it's not even funny. At the turn of the decade, Nintendo wasn't doing so well in North America. Their latest game, Radar Scope, was a commercial flop. So Hiroshi Yamauchi, who at the time was president of the company, turned to an industrial designer named Shigeru Miyamoto to convert the unsold cabinets into a new game. And the rest is video game history. From those humble beginnings arose Donkey Kong, the game that launched the careers of two of gaming's biggest icons, the Big Ape himself and Mario, who originally bore the name of Jumpman. The object of the game is to save the girl Pauline by climbing a series of stages dodging obstacles like barrels, cement plates that look like pies, and bouncing spring weights, and eventually removing the supports from the girders at the top. You can get bonus points from jumping obstacles, collecting items, and smashing enemies with a hammer! This game set the foundation for modern platformers by being the first to use jumping, as well as being the first known game to show the story. Simple though it was. This game was a huge success, but not without its obstacles. In 1982, Universal took Nintendo to court, claiming that the game was infringing on the classic movie King Kong. However, the judge ultimately ruled in favor of Nintendo, allowing the game to continue. And one last bit of trivia. This was originally going to be a Popeye game until the licensing deal fell through. The face of modern gaming was a Popeye stand-in. Seriously, imagine what it would be like if our hero got his fill on spinach instead of spaghetti. Funny, Donkey Kong had more history behind it than the game that takes number 2. Of course, I still think this one is better. Yeah, I'm talking about Galaga. If you haven't heard of this game by now, then prepare to take notes because this game is the very definition of old school. Released in 1981, this is one of Namco's most famous games. It's a sequel to Galaxian, and it has a similar premise. You control a lone starcraft and try to shoot down enemy aliens as they swoop down to attack you. There were several things added to the formula, however, such as the ability to have more than one shot on screen at a time, and a count of the player's hit-miss ratio at the end of the game. Two of these improvements stand out in particular, however. One is the challenging stage that popped up every few levels, in which lines of harmless enemies fly on screen for a limited time, giving you a chance to earn some serious bonus points. The second is the boss Galaga, which can capture your ship. However, if you destroy that same boss Galaga while in flight, you earn the famous double ship, which gives you double the firepower so you can really rack up the points. This game is fun, addictive, and best of all, you can pretty much find it on any platform nowadays. In fact, if you haven't played it, you may as well put it on your gaming to-do list. Right under finishing this countdown. Speaking of which, it's time to find out what my number 1 is. Okay, you probably saw this coming, but my pick for the number 1 arcade game of the 80s is a game that's had an immense impact not only on gaming, but on the decade's culture. It is a game that has remained incredibly popular from its original release in 1980 to this very day, and stands the test of time in a way that few other games have been able to match. It is a game that is as synonymous with arcades as Mario is to consoles. In other words, PacMan. This game has a legacy that goes back farther than even Mario, and it's not very hard to see why. It is the very definition of simple, old-school fun. For those of you who don't know how to play, yeah, both of you, I'll explain that first. You control the titular disc-like figure around a maze, munching dots and avoiding ghosts. Each maze has 4 power pellets that temporarily turn the ghosts blue so that you can eat them for bigger points. This game was incredibly influential in many ways. It created the maze chase genre. It proved that characters in video games could be important. It introduced power-ups to gaming. Its intermissions are often considered to be the first ever cutscenes. And if you want further proof of its staying power, Consider the fact that it's been ported to nearly every gaming platform imaginable, including that horrid port on the Atari that I used to play.
What? I was young. I didn't know better.
And if you're still not convinced, consider the numerous spin-offs it spawned. Ms. Pac-Man, Super Pac-Man, Pac-and-Pal, Pac-Mania, Pac-Man World 2, Pac-Man Championship Edition, the list goes on! He's the first mascot of gaming. He's been in cartoons. He inspired a hit song. He's appeared in a Google logo. He's been enshrined in both the Smithsonian and the Museum of Modern Art. With how much this game has influenced the industry and culture as a whole, it's safe to say that Pac-Man is not only the best arcade game of the 80s, it's one of the games that defined the 80s.
I'm the quarter guy saying here's to the arcade. Home to some of the best memories 25 cents can buy.
No.